on the internet. First thing I needed to do was get some scrap material. I didn't want to spend a lot of money to build these, so my main objective was to save cost, of course. So I looked for different materials that I had laying around. The first step was to take my 54-inch piece of 4-inch channel iron and mark it at 16 inches. That's the length of the underside of the bucket. Next, I'll cut a piece of 1 by 3/8 by 4 inches long flat bar. This will serve as a spacer between the base of the bucket and the bottom of the fork. You'll see me use this cutoff wheel a lot, and it's a great tool. It's a rigid cutoff wheel, and I'll put a link to it in the description because a lot of people have asked me about it. It's a great tool. I ran out of battery on my tool, so I decided not to use it. So my wife got out the Sawzall and cut through this 1-inch round bar. Here I'm just kind of mocking it up to see how it's going to fit together. Next, I need to cut an 11-inch piece, which will serve as the parallel piece to the top of the fork. You'll see here in a minute we're going to weld it together. Again, it's 11 inches. Next, I'm going to drill a hole in that to accept a nut and a bolt to go through it. Here I am, I'm going to mark that 5 inches from the side, the end that's welded. And so that will accept a nut. Again, it's 5/8, I believe, but I'm drilling like a 3/4 hole, and I'm going to weld the nut on the underside. You'll see here in just a minute. It's about the only welding I'm going to do on this. Here my wife is just cleaning all the rust off of it. Of course, it's just scrap material, so I would have waited, but she really wanted to clean it up, and that gave her something to do while I was working on getting some of the other measurements and stuff. Next, here I am welding the nut that I spoke about just earlier. I cut another piece of channel iron 8 inches long and put this 1-inch round bar on the end of it, just elevating it about a ½ inch off the bottom. This round bar will support most of the weight on the front edge of the bucket, so I'll need to put a lot of weld on it just to make it strong. At this point, my wife takes over and starts welding the whole thing together, and I just become her helper at this point. Her welds look as good as mine, at least anyway, so they're definitely just as strong. The metal was pretty rusty, so we had some trouble with our ground sometimes when we're welding. This is just a Hobart 140 small 110 MIG machine, and it's great for little projects like this. The dimension from the back of the bucket to the front of the fork is 16 inches, and that's where we're going to weld this eventually. At this point, we're just going to weld the 8-inch piece to the 11-inch piece above the round bar, and we've got to get it nice and straight so it'll sit good on the forks. At this point, my wife is just going to weld all the inside radiuses of those pieces, and just to give it as much strength as possible. We're going to reinforce it with some plates on the sides later, but the better it's sealed up, the less chances it'll rust and break apart. I was super proud of her weld, so we needed to celebrate that with a high five. It's important to seal all the edges and weld them all up. It's going to give you the most structural integrity, and it's going to prevent water from getting trapped underneath the welds, and they'll last longer that way. Well, after we weld this side here, we're going to grind the whole edge back down smooth. Not completely, but mostly. And that way we won't have bumps where our plates are going to sit on the sides. I'm just going to weld the inside radius again of this before we weld on these side gussets. These are going to give a majority of the strength to the two parallel pieces. My wife will put a complete seal weld on this all the way around on both sides, inside and out. Now it's time for the second side. Exact same process, just rinse and repeat. Next, we're going to weld the 1 by 3/8 flat bar on the very back of the pallet fork. This is just going to be a standoff to provide contact for the back of the fork against the underside of the bucket. Next, we're going to take a 5/8 by, I think, 10-inch all thread, and I'm just going to cut it down to about 7 inches, 6 or 7 inches, and we're going to weld a little T-handle on it. That way we can get leverage to tighten it tightly against the bucket. If you do this, be sure to put plenty of weld on this, because if that thing snaps off because of the pressure you're putting on it, you might hit your fingers on something and put some blood on your knuckles and it might hurt. So be sure you get plenty of weld on here. And here I'm just explaining to my wife that we need to put lots of weld on this to make it nice and strong, because it's going to take a lot of force. Now I'm just going to cut off the excess using my rigid cutoff wheel that I like so much. This is the final step before priming and painting, and we're ready to use. Of course, we got one more to build just like this. Now I'll use some Rust-Oleum made for rusty parts primer, and this will seal it up pretty good and keep it from rusting away. Now I'm just going to put a nice coat of orange paint on it to match the tractor, and that'll dress it up and make it look nice for years to come. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, please hit the like button, and for more content like this, hit the subscribe. We do all kinds of projects, and so if you have a specific type of project you like, feel free to leave us a comment. I put links to some of the tools in the video description below. I also will put some links below to all of our social media. And if you like this video, feel free to subscribe and click the like button. And it would be greatly appreciated if you